Welcome everyone. Thank you for coming to this Rewilding Montana event. My name is Stephanie C. I'm with the Buffalo Field Campaign. If you watch the bison footage, some of our organization's footage is used in the making of that film. And I'm going to be moderating tonight. It's my first time doing this kind of thing, so bear with me. This is very exciting. We have a very distinguished panel tonight representing a huge spectrum of perspectives on wildlife issues: ecological, historical, Native American, educational, commercial, sportsmen, and women. And I am the one woman up here tonight, hopefully helping to represent the female perspective on these things. And let's see, I have some short bios I wanted to introduce our guests with. I'm going to start over here. George Werdner is a proud alumni of both UM and MSU. He has written 35 books on natural history and environmental issues, including the very influential books Welfare Ranching and Wildfire. George has worked as a Montana hunting guide and is licensed outfitter in Yellowstone, where he leads natural history tours and photo workshops. Among his many other accomplishments, George conducted a 2-year study of the biological attributes of the greater Yellowstone ecosystem for the Journal of Conservation Biology. During that study, he contacted more than 130 biologists to discuss biological issues, so you can see he has a pretty good overview of the ecological parameters of the region. And our next panelist is Ron Moody. He is in his second year as a member of the Montana Fish, Wildlife, and Parks Commission. He's also celebrating his 20th anniversary as a Montana volunteer hunter education instructor, a role he still sees as central to the success of the wildlife conservation mission. Ron also represents the Commission on the Private Land Public Wildlife Council, which focuses on the relationship between urban sportsmen and rural landowners. In addition to his FWP-related activities, Ron is the current chair of the Bureau of Land Management Resource Advisory Council for Central Montana, which covers the Missouri Breaks and surrounding prairie regions. Ron served for many years as a member of the Montana Wildlife Federation's Board of Directors and as an officer of Montana Wildlife Federation. For 15 years, he wrote a regular column titled Nimrod's Trace, in which he endeavored to describe the hunter's place in the modern world and to find a place for hunters and wildlife in the future of the 21st century. He is a recipient of the Montana Wildlife Federation Don Aldrich Conservation of the Year Award and Fred Carver Sportsman of the Year Award and the Montana Wildlife Federation Communicator of the Year Award. And our next panelist is Chief James St. Goddard. Thank you. Chief Jimmy, as he is affectionately known, is a hereditary chief of the Blackfeet Nation and Blackfeet Confederacy of Tribes, a direct descendant of the 7 chiefs of the Blackfeet Nation, the only indigenous tribe in Montana. Chief Jimmy's people have been here for 35,000 years, which is slightly more than the 5th generation Montanans we hear so much about. You gotta love that. Perhaps just as important for our purposes, Chief Jimmy is what is known as a grandfather's child, raised by the tribal elders to be an authorized spokesperson on wildlife issues for his people and really for the animals themselves. He is a former member of the Blackfeet Tribal Business Council and the Blackfeet Culture Council, who has worked with Secretaries of the Interior in the last 3 administrations to improve Indian country. Chief Jimmy has worked with Eloise Coble in the landmark litigation to secure justice for Native American people, and he also was instrumental in securing federal legislation on sacred sites, which among other things resulted in the transfer of the Valley of Chiefs in Montana to tribal ownership. And finally, Richard Manning. Richard is an award-winning environmental author and journalist with particular interest in the history and future of the American prairie and its agricultural communities. He writes frequently about trauma and poverty for the National Native Children's Trauma Center based at the University of Montana, where he is a senior research associate. Richard worked as a journalist, reporter, and editor for more than 30 years, including 4 years at the Rewilding. In 1995, he was the recipient of a John S. Knight Fellowship from Stanford University. He is a 3-time winner of the Seattle Times TV Blethyn Award for Investigative Journalism, and also won the Audubon Society Journalism Award and the inaugural Richard J. Margolis Award in 1992. He lives in Missoula with his wife, Tracy Stone Manning, who is justifiably very proud of. Very sweet. We are grateful to Richard for allowing us to plagiarize the name of tonight's event from the title of his most recent book, Rewilding the West. While he has written a total of 8 books, including Grasslands, I'd like to read the beginning of a review from Headwaters News of Rewilding the West. It kind of sets the tone for tonight's discussion, and I quote, "In Rewilding the West, Richard Manning provides an account of the great ecological trauma suffered by the temperate grassland landscape of the northern Great Plains and provides a forceful ecological and economical argument for restoration of this prairie landscape through the creation of an American prairie preserve. Rewilding the West begins by describing a grand vision of restoring the prairie. Manning explains that not so long ago, the plains were not as empty as they are now. The plains supported a substantial amount of wildlife, including herds of large mammals such as buffalo, elk, antelope, and deer, as well as the predators that feed on them, wolves and bears. What would it take to restore the prairie landscape so that it could support these mammals again?" And that is the question that we hope to dive into this evening. And with that, I'd like to offer the panelists an opportunity to offer some brief remarks about that, Rewilding Montana. George, we can start with you.
How about you have a big start? Seriously.
Okay. Richard?
Oh, you're putting me first? I was going to go last and back clean up here, so try it this way. I just saw the bison film next door. It's the first time I've seen that. And it was interesting because there's kind of a dichotomy in the film that activates my work. And a lot of the film was dedicated to that kind of the old idea of conservation and the clashes we've had for many, many years now over conservation and parks and things like that, in that kind of odd show around Yellowstone National Park. And then a lot of it was dedicated to talking about reintegrating bison into the economy. And that's more what I think about. We tend to think that, or we tend to forget that things like wild, concepts like wild, parks, and wildlife are all fairly new terms. These are new things. We had to make those up when our economy became so vicious that we had to exclude certain parts from it. But in fact, humanity's always had an economy. We just didn't have a concept of wild as separate from us. Hunter-gatherers for hundreds of thousands of years existed with wildlife. They just didn't call it wildlife, they called it food. And what motivates me, that brings me back to grassland, is first of all, its ability to teach us unlike any other ecosystem. If we look at grassland and the history of the Great Plains especially, when they reached the maximum population about 1909, and they've been declining ever since in population. So that was kind of the maximum, including during native years, by the way. When native people were there, the population was much sparser on the Great Plains than they peaked in 1909. So we're coming back to something that looks like what it looked like pre-settlement there. But at the same time, well, one of the most amazing facts to me was that in terms of biomass produced, the Great Plains were probably more productive before they were settled. So we bring all this technology and we bring in fencing, we bring in our cattle, our tractors, we bring in our farm subsidies and fertilizers and all those things, and they produce less than they do now. And we can do that in pretty gross numbers by talking about 30 million bison on there before. Well, that's roughly how many cattle are there now. And so what do we miss here? What do we miss in terms of productivity? And that's what intrigues me about this place and about reassembling it, so we can look at that productivity and have that magic that was the Great Plains that produced those great herds, not just to take care of the wildlife, but to take care of us as well, and reinvent an economy that harnesses nature's real power.
Well said. Thank you very much. Chief Jimmy, some thoughts from you.
It's on now. Okay, next clock. I just think this forum to happen. It's very important what we're doing today, because the future relies on what's going to happen with these small groups of people that are trying to save what might be the last real wilderness of us as human beings and who we thought we were. The basis of this country is dissolving. So the people that are leading this country, like my good friend John and Brian and Max, they gotta think, are they true leaders? Are they just making a decision that's gonna help them? They all own ranches or farms, but the leaders got to believe that something needs to happen. We have brilliant, brilliant people to stop this deterioration of the society. But if you don't start listening to us, we've come out and we've decided to try to help. We picked Mr. Schweitzer to try to help us. And us being just as human as believing in people, we didn't know he was doing the awful job that he's been doing. I speak for a lot of people. My Blackfoot Confederacy in Canada. And my cousin, some of them watched the movie Narcissus and Smokey and Irvin. But I want to mention something real quick. I don't know if it's a warning, but people in this Blackfeet country you call Montana need to start trying to listen. The hunters and the ranchers, they're just as smart as anybody else. But you're not going to have what you have now, ranchers and hunters, if you continue to not listen to these people. That's a warning. I'm going to be here for 50 years to try to help you. I remember Mr. Conrad Burns, and I told him when he first tried to take our court system away, that our people are coming back as buffalo and you can't stop us. You might as well stop now. And he said, you're just an Indian. Well, Mr. Conrad Burns sits home and writes an article and wishes that he was doing the same thing he's done. But it's not who he was sitting in that U.S. Senate seat. And we never do if we don't listen. But this is serious, 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 heartfelt stuff that nobody could compare anything to. The people that sit in this room, it's not cliche you're here. It's not cliche that we're all tree huggers. Well, they tied us Indians to those trees. We're here for a darn good reason, and that's because we have mixed our hearts with our minds. And that's brilliant. Nobody gets more brilliant than that. We call him Apastuki. We have many ways of looking at him. But he's here. You can see it in that video. You can see it in this filmmaker's heart. You can see it and hear it from everybody. I'm a bureaucrat, but I still love the animals. The side where he loves the animals is that real person. He's not a bureaucrat. I have a lot of responsibility, my good friends. It is truly an honor to sit here, because Umuk BC, the wolf, in Ini is my protector and my provider. And what the United States has given me has never been my protector or my provider. He's out there in the wilderness waiting to help the people that thought they were my protector and my provider. And we sit in this room, the people in this room, I can't tell you how wonderful it feels. Because right now, I'm aging backwards. Brian, John, and Max. I'm not going to get old. Every tribal member in this state, our tribal descendant, for the next month is going to hear me. I just thank you from the bottom of my heart for me to be part of this. And I thank Jerry and Tom and all the people that have done this. There isn't a better place on earth that I would be right now than to think about what we're thinking tonight. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It's an honor to have you here. Ron.
Thank you for this opportunity. I followed a hunter's path to come here tonight, one that has spanned my entire adult lifetime. I was just another itinerant white guy looking for snow caps and forests and ski slopes and wild open places when I came to Montana. And I started off in the mountains, the first place I lived. Eventually discovered the prairies. Living in Billings and driving, making deliveries in the country north of Billings, I encountered a completely unexpected majesty, beauty, and wildness that I'd never heard anybody mention to me. And most of it got cut out of the frame in the John Wayne movies. So, surprised me. I live in Lewistown, and I have focused my attention geographically on central Montana, the Missouri Breaks, and the northern glaciated plains and short grass prairies. I'm now, after 22 years of conservation advocacy in this state, which is what you call a loudmouth citizen in Montana, been appointed to sit on the other side of the decision-making process, where I have been charged with the responsibility of making the decisions and participating in making decisions on what happens with the wolf, what happens with the bison. That's where I sit right now. I'm going to end up my introductory remarks here by describing to you the focus that I have guided myself to out of experience over the last 20 years as to where I can place my lever to pry the greatest weight, make the greatest difference, move the largest mountain with the force that I am able to apply, and it is with people. I support, as a hunter, the return of wolves to the ecosystems of the Northern Rockies. I support the restoration of functional shortgrass prairie ecosystems in the Northern Plains. But I also see the vital importance of preserving that part of our human society that still understands soil, water, and weather, and how to make food from those elemental ingredients. Ruralism, as an element of American society, retains values that we all need desperately, whether we know it or not. I do not accept destroying agrarian culture in order to erase its flaws. Now, this is not a hypothetical discussion with me. I encounter rural culture right here. This This month, I'm in Missoula, talking to an essentially urban audience. Last month, I was in Malta, Montana, with a gymnasium full of ranchers and associated people who are all mad at Hornets about the idea of creating a national monument around the Bitter Creek Wilderness Study Area in Valley County, Montana. Although most of them in there did not seem to know that, the local paper reported that it was about the Missouri Breaks Monument, which was designated 11 years ago. But still, as irritating and frustrating as it can be, we as the American people have for 3 centuries exercised the process of replacement of cultures. And Wendell Berry describes this process eloquently in his book, Unsettling America, and I would recommend that to you, in which one culture in existence establishes a way of life and a landscape, and new people come in, destroy those people, chase them out, and replace them with a new culture in that same landscape. And this process of exploiters becoming victims, the victims are replaced by a new set of exploiters, is what we've been doing for 300 years, ever since the Spaniards landed. And every time that happens, we lose everything that was good and valuable about the whole culture. And that's my objection to much of what is going on in the public forum right now in discussion of what it really means to restore the wolf to the ecosystems in the Northern Rockies. What it would really mean to restore the bison to the short grass period is it has been presented as and has been interpreted by the potential victims as a replacement activity. That one culture of people are going to be erased from the landscape and replaced by a new culture of people. And my passion is to persuade my fellow Americans and my fellow Montanans to stop, think about that, and comprehend the idea of change as a synthesis and not as a replacement, where you synthesize the new idea with the old knowledge. I believe that it is eminently possible to restore natural, healthy, biotic communities of essentially the original short grass prairie in large parts of the northern glaciated plains. I do not believe that this will take place successfully as a replacement strategy, where we essentially erase the 20th century and say, oops, that was a mistake. We're going to start over again. I predict that will not happen. But if we are willing to be convivial, if we're willing to be synthesizing with people who are really irritating to do business with, we can make this happen. And we Americans have a history of successfully making great things happen in our natural landscapes. In my mind, the great accomplishment of American civilization has been the conservation of major portions of the original ecosystems and biotic community that existed here before the European occupation. That's been our greatest accomplishment as a civilization. Everything else we've done, every other civilization has done in some context the same thing. We've done that uniquely. Your turn.
Thank you, Mr. Lee.
Thank you very much. Sandra? Okay. I have a slightly different view. I've seen the sort of our civilization advance about European Americans as a classic example of overshoot. That is, we tend to move into areas and try to change the land and make it do something that it could never do, it shouldn't do. And we always try to push the limits. So, for example, a lot of Montana, they try to grow wheat in. And you can grow wheat sometimes in some years when you have a lot of moisture, but a lot of years you get crop failures. And if it were not for the fact that there are government subsidies that prevent those farmers from losing their shirts during that time, there wouldn't be any wheat farming in a lot of Montana that there is now because of overshoot. And then if you take an ecological perspective and you say, how much soil erosion are we getting during that whole time, and how are we affecting watersheds and so forth, and what have we done to the wildlife in trying to wheat farm in Montana, we find that if you put in all those costs, it makes absolutely no sense to wheat farm in Montana, because there are better places to grow wheat, where you still have some impacts, but they're not as great. A lot of the, talking about displacement, that's happening naturally. That's what sort of the Popper's theory is about, and that's what the demographic statistics show, is that there's been overshoot. It can't sustain that in the long run. We're artificially maintaining it on life support in a way. A good example that I see of this sort of rewilding kind of thing happen is in the Northeast, where I've spent a lot of time as well. And if you look at the history of some of places like Maine, northern New England, and so forth, the original settlers came in there and cut all the forests. And they cut all the big trees out. Eventually, most of the mills closed down. In fact, they're still closing down. There's virtually no mills left in New England operating. The forest over that time that was cleared for either farming or for forestry has grown back. Vermont, for example, was 80% deforested. It's 80% forest today. It was all by accident. There was nobody coming in there and saying, you guys got to move out of here. It happened because of overshoot. And that's what's happening in a lot of parts of America. I want to draw an analogy. I spent a lot of years in Alaska, and I used to think about how I could go right outside of Anchorage and go up in the mountains 10, 15 miles from downtown Anchorage, and I could see grizzly bears and wolves. Just on the outskirts of Anchorage, a big city of 300,000 or 400,000 people, about half the population of Montana. And I thought, what's different? How come, and this is back in the 80s I was doing this thinking, how come I can't go outside of, say, Missoula or Bozeman and see grizzly bears and wolves? And a lot of it had to do because we had a lot of these marginal activities. We had logging and ranching and wheat farming and so forth going on that wouldn't exist if the real costs of those operations were considered, and without all the various economic as well as environmental subsidies. And so, thank you. It made me realize that we could have a lot closer connection to wildlife. We can have wildlife on the edge of our cities. Maybe not grizzly bears walking in downtown Missoula, but certainly grizzly bears in the rattlesnake and in the Bitterroots and so forth. And so, as part of that, if you start looking at how we use our landscape, you find that a lot of it, bang for buck, so to speak, it's marginal. The wheat farms in Montana, for example, have 1/3 the bushel per acre as a wheat farmer in Kansas, for example, or Minnesota. So you're not really producing the same amount, but you're doing a lot more destruction, having higher soil erosion and so forth to get that wheat. It doesn't make real sense. It doesn't make sense to me. And there are other things that you could do with that land that make more sense, and that is restoration of the native vegetation, restoration of the native wildlife. And in that sense, I think that restoring of native wildlife and for example, the restoration of the wolf that's happening now is a way to sort of make amends for past mistakes, and to realize that we want to ask the question of what is really the best use of these lands. Economically, if left to its own devices like New England, the economics answers that in a lot of ways. But it's all happenstance, and it takes a long time. Some of that could be with some thought and some planning and some active work that could be changed more rapidly without as much long-term environmental damage along the way. I guess I'll do that. My comments for now.
This is great. We've got some awesome perspectives up here. I think we're going to have some pretty healthy discussion. And I just want to bring it to folks out here that have questions for the panelists. Let's think about the bigger picture, the vision, rewilding Montana. What is that going to look like? And there's two representatives in this discussion that aren't in this room tonight, and that is the wolf and the buffalo. And their perspectives are equally as important, and some would say more so than our own humans' perspective. So I would like to just try to invoke that a little bit as we talk about these things tonight. Coexistence is something that I think, thank you very much, that I think that we're gonna find is something we're just gonna have to look at very closely, very strongly, in order to get where we want to. And we have a unique opportunity in Montana because it is such a big, open, wild, still relatively wild place. There's a lot of opportunity for us to get where we want to go and do it well. And with that, I just wanted to open it up. I'm going to walk around with this little thing and come close to you. So if you'd like to ask the panelists any questions, please raise your hand. And I guess if you want to state your name or if you have any affiliation, feel free to do so.
Hey, this is open for any of you to respond to. The third gentleman brought up a really good point of depopulation of rural areas. That applies also to the tribes. But I don't think there's a mutually exclusive thing where we can't have bison, a free-ranging bison herd and rural populations. I think that there's potential for conflict. But what about the brass tacks of dealing with the issues of rural populations in Montana and a free-ranging bison herd? And I don't care who responds to that.
Thank you.
I'll take a stab at it. Excellent question. I think that an agricultural economy in the northern plains based on wheat and beef has been an expensive hobby that the American people have indulged in about as long as we can afford to. Something's going to happen economically in the northern plains states. And I think it is happening, but it's only in its beginning. There will be people on the land. There will be people on the land making a living somehow. Richard Manning, in his book, Rewilding the West, offers a couple of ideas, and I'll let you get to those. But I predict that one of the most valuable opportunities for people to, and when I say people, I mean any and all people, but the Euro-Americans are going to be the ones who have the most difficulty staying here, will be associated with producing, maintaining, and in some context selling access to wildlife. And I really want to keep it in those general terms because there are so many possibilities. There are essentially two kinds of economies associated with wildlife: public economy and private economy. Private economy is basically the European model where people actually own the animals and sell some use of them, whatever it is, from pictures to the meat. The public economy is essentially an American invention, and it is one in which the animal is publicly owned on public commons, and people under regulation of law are allocated some use of that wildlife, and the economic energy that flows there is from their expenditures while doing that. Two different economic models. So one or both of those will produce a new economy for people in the northern plains. What I am really anxious to present to urban Americans is that you can't learn to be a person of land, person of place, by taking a class or reading a book. You have to live there and get into that land and get into that water and get into that air and struggle with it and learn how to let it teach you how to live there. And that is the only way that people can continue to exist on that land. As the other speakers have eminently related, we tried to impose an alien lifestyle on the land, and it has basically kicked our butts. So what do we do next?
Thank you for that response. Do we?
To add just a bit there, I wouldn't disagree with anything that was wrong, right?
Right.
Yeah, said at all. And in fact, that's an important dynamic in this. And that's why I always think in terms of economy. We're talking about restoration economy. And really, the economy of the grassland is grass. And the people who live there are very good at growing grass. They figured that out. Even to the point of knowing they shouldn't grow native grasses. So the ranchers around Malta will tell you the government told us to put in exotic grasses years ago. We went broke doing it. So we put the native grasses back in. They learned those hard lessons. And that's part of restoration. For those of you who saw the bison film, heard my friend Dan O'Brien talk about his commercial enterprise. He learned that the hard way by being a rancher. He went broke on cows. And then he learned that, and he told me one time, if I get this right, if I can get it so people can make money growing native grass here, then I can do more for restoration than anything you can think of. And he's right about that. But then we can think of a lot of other things. So in Phillips County, again, there are 5,000 ponds that were dug by beginning in the New Deal up until now. 5,000 ponds, that's a pond per square mile. If you're ever going to restore that landscape, you're going to tear them out. And you're going to have to restore many, many, many miles of water courses because that's the productive place for the riparian zones. That's all work that can be done by people who live in that area and know how to do it best because they know that landscape. So restoration is a big job. And then the other dynamic we often forget about that is the urban-rural dynamic. A bunch of us from Missoula go out to Phillips County and spend money because we want to go there. That's part of our life. That's part of our range. That's not new. That's not a new thing at all. In fact, when they created the CMR, officially named it in 1963, they did an economic study that found that the hunters were producing more, this was in 1963, producing more money per acre than the ranchers were producing out there, the people going out there. But it's not even new to them because there's always been a migration from western Montana to eastern Montana in the summertime, which in urban rural people are going back to native people. And the Blackfeet didn't necessarily like it when the sailors were coming into the land. They lived there. They put quite a bit from this place to that place. So those dynamics are all really important. And in Montana, there's really no separation between urban and rural. A lot of us live in that rural place despite the fact we live in Missoula. It's a part of our life is grounded there.
Let me add one footnote to your last statement. In the minds of rural people, and particularly the isolated rural communities of Montana, there is a huge gap between rural and urban.
And in the minds of the urban people as well.
I live in Lewistown, Montana, the county seat of Fergus County. The people who live in Winifred, Montana, 40 miles north in the same county, consider me to be an alien invader. I don't count as a local resident. So.
That's in the minds of the local people who are both rural and urban, but in fact, in economic fact, there's less separation than we think there is.
And I just want to just bring it back a little bit to, you know, bison and wolves are two of the animals that are representing the rewilding Montana. How do you see them fitting into these pictures? How are we going to make room to let them come home and restore themselves on the landscape that has been theirs for tens of thousands of years, hundreds of thousands of years? Not just what's going on between rural Montanans and urban Montanans and everything in between, but how the wildlife fits into this picture. What is it we're gonna have to do as a people, to make that happen?
I'll take a stab at least related to wolves and impacts on livestock. There are a lot of studies, mostly done elsewhere, that show that various animal husbandry practices can greatly reduce conflicts with, say, wolves or other top predators and livestock. Most of them require more attention to the livestock than currently happens. As one of my friends cynically said, the typical way of ranching in Montana is the Columbus method. You put the cows out in the spring and come back and discover how many are alive in the fall. Generally meaning that very little attention is given to those animals. But in places where it's illegal, in a lot of parts of the world, it is illegal to kill things like wolves. People have no choice, and so they have to learn to adapt. For example, I've spent a bunch of time in Chile lately. In the country of Chile, it's illegal to kill cougars. And so people there, there's people who still kill them, showing him behind the back, so to speak. But basically, they have to learn to adapt to not being able to kill cougars. The same thing, we can even look in the United States. California is a state where there is no sport hunting of cougars at all. And there's 6,000 cougars in that state. People have to make changes in the way that they run their livestock operations, such things as having shepherds, lambing, calving sheds, having a removal of dead animals quickly from an area. All that can go a long way to reducing conflicts. But I don't anticipate that those things will happen voluntarily. And but that's a way to learn to live with predators, for example, and still maybe make a living raising livestock in some places.
Thank you very much. Jimmy?
That will work too good. They probably could hear me just by just talking, but I want to give you an example. In Blackfeet, for about 20 years, we let our buffalo, 750 head, run free. And the only ones that didn't like it was some of the ranchers, and most of the ranchers were half-breeds. I say that in a good way. And the wolves ran free also. I was 9 years old and I first ran into my first wolf. I live up by Badger to Medicine, next door to Badger to Medicine, south of East Glacier. But there's many ways to do this. They talk about economics, but you see economics with a stunt to eastern Montana. I think that we need people to take initiative to say, hey, that place is dying out. And it is dying out. I think it's the cheapest acreage in Montana. There's ideas that could come from here, and one of the things is they talk about science. One of the legislators questioned me about the philosophy of Indian thinking. It is comparable to science. For the last 60 years, we've been trial and error of how to take care of the wolf. Well, for 35,000 years, the Blackfeets have been trial and error. So who has more years of study? There's many of us that want to be part of this. And it's not philosophy, it's real. We can talk economics all night, but still that wolf is laying out there. See if Mr. Schweitzer's going to shoot him. He wants to shoot him. That gentleman up by Troy, Montana, the chairman of the Environmental Quality Committee of the Legislature of Montana, in his testimony, 7 times in a row, he said, when can I pull the trigger? When can I pull the trigger? It's going to take good planning. But there's people out there. I got some pretty good hits on my email. Very, very wealthy people. And I always thought about what opportunities do I have? What goals do I have to really show why we're still here in Itzitapi? This is why we're here. The buffalo are here for a reason. The wolf are here for a reason. It's not to make $1. If this is true America, people got to start standing up. Show that economic dollar that you made off of the state of Montana, that you took from the Blackfeet people to settle here. You had to sign a treaty in 1855. My ancestors put you here. But now you've forgotten. You've forgotten very well, Brian, John, Max. Somebody needs to take a strong initiative. And that's what I'm going to do. There are many goals in my life. There's a young man right here, my 5-year-old son. He's a little obnoxious tonight. But he doesn't take me away from my goals, my priorities. We have the resources to do it. There's a college in almost every town. We have the Blackfeet Community College. People don't know this is going on. They thought Brian Schweitzer was taking care of our wolves and our bison, not killing them. And they're going to wake up when I tell them. The politics and the political arena and the thinking of this state is going to change with what we do here. And that's what the ability of these strong men in this room and these just wonderful, awesome, wise women that show up at these places. This is a tidal wave of carcinated bison that have come back. It's prophecy. And I could talk prophecy all night. But it's 35 years of trial and error that nobody has listened to. We were living in lodges when the Euro-Americans were still pulling the meat off the bone in those caves. We know. Now's the time to come out and let you know. We want to help the society more than ever. I want to say something that I don't want to shock this audience. But you know that 80% of our population of Indians in Montana don't want to do nothing for your American society because you are going to destroy yourself. And we see it. The elder told me that when China gives us back our land, he's going to push that white man away and say, you don't have no money to do it. You don't have no reason to live on this land no more. Just those Indians do. Well, Osama bin Laden didn't scare me. But he scared a whole lot of Euro-Americans. This is important. That's fine. I got more to say, but I'm got my buddy over here on the left.
Thank you, Jimmy. I think we can take another question from the audience. I'm sensing a conference like days long.
Mine's kind of based off of what Chief was just saying, is there is a flyer out front where it shows 12% of livestock kills are due to domesticated dogs, only 2% are due to wolves. However, the animosity to wolves is much higher than domesticated dogs. And in the buffalo film, it showed how the Native Americans and the bison buffalo was kind of tied together, and one of the intentions of destroying the buffalo was to push the Native Americans onto a reservation. So there's a correlation in our culture where Native Americans and wildlife are directly related. And I was very puzzled by the fact that the wolves were out for so long, they were reintroduced, they came back a little bit, they were taken off of the endangered species list for what seemed to be an error based on politics, not science. And only 4 months later, they lifted the ban on hunting after they were taken off the endangered species list. It was very odd, and I wonder if you could say, I mean, I hate to say it, but it almost seems like the intention on this, just a lot of dots don't line up. Could it be that the abuse to the wolves is to actually just hurt the American Indian? I mean, I don't know. I'd like to hear what you would have to say about that.
We all have computers, and we all know how to research. There's a study done by Dr. Joe Stone. He graduated from Portland State. He's a Blackfeet. He left the reservation, or the Indian Nation, about 20 years ago. He got his doctorate degree in clinical psychology, psychiatry. And he did a study about historical post-traumatic stress disorder, about the first encounter of Euro-Americans until now. Every day they kill a wolf, every day they kill a bison, every day they kill a grizzly bear. He continued to destroy us. But some of us are still strong. I would like to introduce that into the courts, that study, to stop everything that's going on with the bison and the wolf. We already talking about it with Senator Inouye, Nick Rahal, the legislator from West Virginia, Frank Pallone from Rhode Island, Dale Kildee from Michigan. But also I mentioned the state of Minnesota. They got everything, 5, 6, 7 times more everything. Only thing we have more is elk. But you got to see their management. I mean, are we so different than the state of Minnesota? Look how many Norwegians are in Montana. Look how many Norwegians are in Minnesota. You guys are exactly alike. I try to speak this way because I don't think we got different heart than Norwegians. I don't think we have less feelings than a Norwegian. I don't think I got less feelings than that rancher that wants to kill my wolves and my bison. But what is the connection? What is that missing link? What is that missing link between that rancher and that hunter? What is that missing link? I think I know that missing link. It's learn like a wolf, that person, to look at these films, to educate them. It's really stereotyping to say education. It's so simple. But what is it? I'm not trying to cure the world. I'm not the Dalai Lama, but I know why he left. But it's wonderful because a tidal wave is building in the city of Missoula tonight. And it's a sea of buffalo. It's a sea of wolves. I want to share something that's been a secret in my tribe for thousands of years. I think it should come out tonight. I have a right. The bison, they give you themselves willingly. That wild animal was trying to push the other one because he loves it and he was dead. That's who we are. The grizzly bear has the power. The only animal on earth that Columbus did not know has the ability, and I'm going to say this, that wolf, every single person that drives up to a wolf or walks up to a wolf or is close to a wolf, that wolf takes off. And you want to know why? That stupid animal knows what you're thinking. Do you believe that? Yes. That's the truth. He's the only one animal in this world that knows what you're thinking. There's something else I want to say that's crazy. We have medicine people that can communicate with those wolves. But they are so scared to give these secrets out that America's going to destroy the Indians. But I don't have that fear. And I'm going to tell that guy in that White House when I go to D.C. in December, I want to make every effort. Brian's been my friend for 13 years. Tester for 15 years. Max knows our family. Governor Brian Schweitzer has a vest, bolo tie, feathers, even has my heart in his office. But if he doesn't stop this, I'm going to ask him back. I'm going to be the real Indian giver. Please listen. Not to the people in this room. I want to let you know what else I do. I'm in Great Falls doing a personal sabbatical of 2.5 years to study white culture. Because when they put that headdress on my head in 2012, which you guys are all invited to in August of 2012, I want to know what those people, those loving people are like out there. But I just really, it's truly an honor. My grandfather, I was raised by grandparents. They told me that my heart was too big, that I would get married too many times, which I did 8 times, but he said you're going to do work, you're going to help more people than you realize. And I really truly believe that, because the guy is working upstairs, and we just got to put a plan together. One of the things I want to add economically is that the Indian nations are very, very in poverty-stricken areas. The young people in those Indian nations would be willing to become, they would be willing to accept the lowest wage anywhere just to ride horseback with the buffalo and the wolves. Be range riders. And I'm going to present this to Brian. I'm upset at him. I'm going to end a relationship of 13 years. But that wolf and that buffalo means more than Brian Schweitzer to me. And who can say that? Who has the gumption to say that? Put my unemployed young Indian men and women to work to take care of these wolves and these buffalo. I mean, look at the salaries these directors earn. $170,000. Could probably put 200 of my people to work. And we could fire the director Mirror or whatever his name is. There's all kinds of ideas we could sit down to about. But you the audience, you don't know how important you are. I mean, I can't even begin to describe how important this is. It's going to change this state. This is the tidal wave, and I think Tom and Jerry again, you know that cat and that mouse that chase each other around?
Absolutely. Go ahead.
You expect me to follow that?
I'm just going to go on a tangent slightly different because you mentioned Minnesota. I just wanted to sort of follow up with something that was mentioned earlier. in just some comparison things, in Minnesota, they have a wolf management plan as well. They're trying to get wolves delisted there, just like Montana does. The Minnesota plan calls for a minimum population of 1,600 wolves in Minnesota, which is half the size of Montana. Right now, in the whole northern Rockies here, there's somewhere around 1,700, 1,800 wolves, somewhere in there. In other words, Minnesota's bottom line is what everybody around here is freaking out over. Another thing in Minnesota that they have is when there is a prey on livestock at a farm, it's investigated, and the farmer talks over with the investigator about what can be done to minimize future depredation. And they have to sign a plan that says, we will make these changes, or if we have a depredation, if there's another future predation, they don't get any compensation unless they've implemented those plans. I'm just pointing this out that there's a way to live with wolves, and we haven't even begun to approach what's possible in this state compared to what some folks are trying in other places. And the point of view that it's, again, as I mentioned, these are probably not going to happen voluntarily, but I don't think that the farmers in Minnesota are any happier than ranchers would be here in Montana. But there are ways to accomplish that.
I need to speak to your remarks because I would dispute the way you used Minnesota in relation to wolf management. Referencing Minnesota in terms of what could be done in Montana is simply an intellectual repetition of the same mistake made in the 19th century with agriculture. If it could work in the Midwest, why can't it work west of the 100th meridian in the arid mountain west? Two different ecosystems, two different systems of life support for predators. Montana is an arid mountain, prairie, steppe ecosystem climate. Minnesota is a much wetter, more fertile boreal forest ecosystem. They have a very productive, dense population of white-tailed deer to feed a lot of wolves in Minnesota. Comparison simply cannot be made. We will find the formula that integrates the wolf as a predator into the biotic communities of the northern Rockies. I think we have a pretty good idea how to do that now. In fact, I would describe the wolf as biologically recovered in the northern Rockies right now. But the wolf has one serious problem, which is with the turmoil in their human support system. That's where the vulnerability of the wolf lies.
George, I can see you want to get back to that. Absolutely.
Two points. The way you can look at it is biomass, and if you look at the biomass of wild game and prey species in the 3 states, Idaho, Wyoming, and Idaho, and compare that to biomass of white-tailed deer in Minnesota, you'll find that we have probably far more than that. I did a study on Oregon and its potential for wolf recovery where I looked at the biomass of prey species there. And my estimate came up with there could support in Oregon alone between 2,000 and 2,500 wolves there based on biomass alone. And it's hard for me to believe that in the 3-state area that there isn't at least as much biomass as the white-tailed deer in Minnesota. That's point number 1. Point number 2, though, what Ron alludes to about the aridity here is absolutely correct. That's what has happened is that livestock producers have externalized one of their costs. A lot of places just are not suitable for raising livestock without having all sorts of externalization of costs, including trampling for riparian areas, dewatering of rivers, the killing of predators, and so forth. That's a factor of life of having livestock in an arid landscape, which suggests that a lot of that place, if you were to internalize those costs and not transfer it to the rest of us and onto the wildlife of the region, would make it difficult for them to, economically survive. So I'll be the first to admit, Ron's right that it's a little easier to raise livestock in Minnesota because you can see the cows on the back 40 and monitor them much more closely. That's one of the factors that makes that more suitable for livestock production than a lot of places in the arid West. And the livestock producers that are willing to adjust their operations and put in things like shepherds, range riders, eliminating dead carrion. That's one of the ways wolves get introduced to livestock is by finding dead animals and preying, eating that, and then they go after the live animals. Making those kinds of changes can make it possible for some of these places to exist. But in my view, they shouldn't be allowed to keep on externalizing all these costs onto our wild heritage. And so I'm going to just keep on pushing it back.
Thank you so much,
I
George.
disagree
I think
with your use of the biomass argument. Distribution has a lot.
we don't have a whole lot of time, so I want to take some more questions from the audience out here.
I work with the Sully Bitterroot Foundation. We do stewardship work on both sides of the Idaho-Montana border. We're non-political, and one of the unique perspectives it's given us is the ability to interact in very rural communities on both sides of the border and not be polarizing because we're not political. And the Sully Bitter has a lot of the big wildlife issues: wolf, salmon, grizzly, wilderness designation, water use, etc. I worry from talking to people in those communities that overzealousness of the environmental community towards some of these issues like the wolf has maybe won the battle with the wolf, at least in the short term, the way they wanted the battle won, but has really poisoned the water for almost every other issue related to reintroduction. Grizzly, especially predator, grizzly, certainly salmon, and other issues. And I wonder if you could just comment if, Ron, you talked about collaboration and cooperation probably significantly tonight, and I do worry that overzealousness of the environmental communities is backfiring as we speak. And if you could just comment on whether you agree, disagree, and where you see collaboration versus some of the same antagonistic practices we've seen. The whole panel, not just you, Ron.
I wake up in the middle of the night with that question in my mind, because I think what we are engaged in is a great effort to communicate across cultural barriers. And I won't lay the onus on overzealous environmentalists, but linguistics play a role. Linguist Frank Luntz has a saying that it's not what you say, it's what people hear. And the poppers, for instance, made a perfectly valid demographic, sociological argument for what's going to happen to people on the plains in terms of depopulation of the rural plains. When they made that argument, they framed it in such a way that the people who heard their statements never heard or interpreted or grasped the validity of the essential argument, or if they did, they wanted to deny it emotionally. What they did here is, you are going to remove us from the land. If not physically, then by some means that we are of no value to you, and your intent is to create a vacant landscape, taking us off of it. So the resistance that you heard a smattering of in the film grows up. That exact thing is happening right now in central and eastern Montana. That's how 2,000 people nearly crowded into the gymnasium at Malta High School on September 6th. interesting to show Bob Abbey that the land is occupied by people who damn sure intend to stay there. And they are tough people because all the wusses left a generation ago. Now, demographic numbers don't lie, that communities are shrinking. There will be some kind of smaller human occupation of the land. But what is not going to happen is we're not going to create a human constituency strong enough to actually produce big enough areas for bison to roam around in a healthy shortgrass prairie with wolves and coyotes and prairie dogs and burrowing owls and 100 other species, at least terns, sage grouse, unless those rural people who right now, because of the way the message of change has been framed to them, have hermetically sealed their society from outside input and ideas. As long as that's true, and as long as the urban people, right now I describe Montana as having 3 tribes of white people. The urban people, rural people, and the hybrids, the Nimrod hunters who live in cities. That as long as those people have not figured out how to communicate with each other across this barrier, that none of those things that are possible will actually happen.
Comments from our other panelists?
I have a comment. In Minnesota, the Leech Lake tribe worked with the state to reserve 870,000 acres for the gray wolf to run free. And the state is allowing them to have jurisdiction. I've walked in most of the blocks in Great Falls, and I think Great Falls is 12.8 miles, Montana. And the majority of Great Falls, Montana is upset. They feel that when this wolf hunt was stopped, the conservative hunt, they cheered. Many, many people are cheering. And how I go about that, I just talk to them. I tell them that something positive could happen, something good. So we shouldn't be intimidated by stepping forward and wanting to change the landscape. Maybe there is wrong people on the committees. We need to speak up in a good way. There's so much positive things can happen. But you can't change a person's lifestyle instantly. If he wants to kill, he's going to kill. But I'm going to stand in front of him and say, hey, wait, hold on. That's what you're running into. That's what we're running into. It's time to stop, to think. Do we really have the answers to people on those committees? There's an election coming up, and I don't want to talk about politics. But those guys are making they're going to make those decisions in Montana. But give me the money. I got Brian Schweitzer elected. I went to every Indian nation in Montana. I went to, 140 towns in Montana. Put me to work. And I will not put anything in front of that wolf and that bison. I will make them old ladies cheer in their house while their young goes out and kills the wolf. That's the positiveness of this. Those Leech Lake Crees are thinking. Those people in Minnesota are thinking. It's like the hunter and the rancher has a grip on Montana, but they don't. It's all political. We need to step out there. I don't know if my colleagues are forced to say what they're saying, or they're free to say what they're saying. But I I guess I'm grateful that my council doesn't control me. Brian doesn't control me. The federal government doesn't control me. Nobody controls Chief Jimmy St. Cador, because nobody pays me. This is my inherent land, all of Montana. I could go to any place in Montana and show you a Blackfeet sacred site. I could go to Hell's Canyon and show you a Blackfeet sacred site. What human being on earth could do that? You're listening to one tonight. Don't let these people put things in front of your way. These wolves and these bison are crying for it. But we're going to put things in our way. Thank you.
Thank you, Jimmy. Richard, did you have anything to add to this part of the discussion? Maybe I can take some more from the folks out here. The discussions that have been happening here tonight represent so many things. Rewilding Montana is obviously a very big subject, which we could all talk about for a really long time. And I would encourage the potential for maybe setting up something where we have a few days together to discuss these things in more detail. And maybe at this point, we can hear some last comments from each of the panelists. George?
Well, I was just going to respond to the prairie and talk about bison versus cattle. You hear all the time out there that cattle just merely replace the bison, but they're not ecological analogs, and that's an important thing to keep in mind. Bison are much more mobile. They don't spend as much time near water and riparian zones as cattle do. Cattle evolved in moist woodlands in Eurasia, and we took them from moist woodlands and we put them in an arid landscape where they're not really particularly well adapted. And that's why we have to do all this subsidies indirectly and directly to maintain them in this environment. Bison don't need that. They can get along a lot better on that landscape than cattle can. And so we've also imposed a cultural tradition. The West was settled from east to west, and so we have New England farmers and Midwestern farmers who are used to having fences on 40 acres or 160 acres. And they come out and they fence up the prairie, which has much more variation in its moisture and its productivity from year to year. And then we try to run a stable livestock operation based on keeping your numbers more or less the same from year to year, which doesn't fit well in that environment. So we've been trying to force that environment with this exotic animal, cattle, to fit an environment it's not particularly well suited for. And bison are, in so many ways, they can survive, they can take care of themselves against wolves, for example. They can live on a lower quality forage than cattle can. They can survive with less water. They're much more adapted to that environment. So in the long run, if you want to see sustainability and a sustainable ecosystems and even a sustainable economy, in the long run, replacing the livestock in many places with wild bison is the thing that makes the most sense.
Here.
I have a question.
Okay.
Is cows native to Montana?
No.
I'm going to make my last remarks because these gentlemen are probably a few minutes older than I am. So I'd like them to talk, after me, because I don't want to be the last one to talk. But we have an ally that wants to work with us. And they're the Chinese. They want to buy a precious metal that sits underneath the Blackfeet. They're willing to pay a pretty penny. I would suggest that we try to work together because we all have great ideas. And I guess Europeans conquered this continent through the use of money. Well, the Chinese have that money. But I want to work good with people. I want to work to where everybody's happy. And I send that message to the ranchers and the hunters, because I'm a hunter. But in the old ways, I didn't have to hunt. They came to me because I offered. That's why we hunted in old ways. I didn't have to kill a deer, it came to me. But I'm just saying that there's some real good ways. We have legal ways. That's the extreme way, but they have to use it. We have to use that when nobody listens. And I'm proud of these people that put that together. You know, I wish there was more Judge Malloy. But I want to work with everybody. I want to work with the commission. I want to work with the committees. So I think there is solutions, some wonderful solutions, to where they really truly understand the bison the way I do. Because a cow is not native to me. A bison is, a wolf is. I want to tell you a quick story about Brings Down the Sun. He was 27 years old in 1870. He was the last Blackfeet to live with 6 grizzlies. So these people have some answers. We have a way. We want to. And I've seen my people on this buffalo video. Rides at the door at Carlson and Narcissus Blood. Those are exact people as I am. What Brings Down the Sun stayed with 7 grizzly bears. How was that possible? They went in and out of his lodge. So I want people to think about that. Schweitzer knows these stories. Correct? He does a cleansing ceremony in his office at the Capitol. I showed him. I'm going to tell you a crazy story before the night's over. I showed him how to light sweetgrass. The first thing he did is light that sweetgrass. He waved it around and said, "Do you think this will get rid of Judy Marks?" Where's the time that I'm going to light my sweetgrass? I don't want to get rid of nobody. Because we're all human beings. That's a true story. That's what he did. So there's a way. There's a way to give us each an opportunity to bring this back. We all dramatize us. But I had tears in my eyes tonight watching that because that's hard. That wolf and that buffalo has nobody to protect them. We're going to let some of them die and some of them live because we want. What sane person can do that? What sane man can do that? What sane woman? You could die, wolf. You could die, buffalo. We're going to save this one, this one. We're going to cripple this one. We're going to help this. That's what I want to ask every legislator. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Moody, and then we'll have Richard Manning with last words, because we didn't get to hear from you too much this evening.
Okay. Richard has been rather reticent tonight. You just got shut out, I guess.
I don't know anything.
I'm going to send you a couple of take-home thoughts. How many of you watched the bison bill? How many of you like the way we handle bison around Yellowstone Park? That's your fault, what you saw back then. We live in the state of Montana. It is within the power of the state of Montana to stop doing that. If you want to change that, then you will have to change the legislature in the state of Montana. But you can do that. But you need to realize it's not going to change until you do that. Another thought. I hark back to the idea that it is possible to recreate short grass prairies and reintroduce bison to areas of the northern plains where they can live according to their natural order. But this is not a small undertaking. The whole essence of the bison is that of large spaces. It is going to take more than one method in order to create those spaces in which a bison and its associated community, biotic community, can exist. American Prairies Foundation is engaged in one experiment in Phillips County, Montana. Another method that is logical and should be exercised was the buying out of grazing leases of cattle so they can be converted to bison. That doesn't even require a change of ownership. But Senator Harry Reid of Nevada 2 weeks ago dropped that rider that would have legalized buying out of grazing leases from the appropriations bill, and nobody seemed to have said a word. It happened in an envelope of silence. So that's a method that you have to retrieve and empower if the bison is going to return to the plains. There are 2 or 3 other methods, including simply management of the public lands in the plains. That's a take-home cost. It is in your hands to put the bison on the plains. Last thought, and this one is about the wolf, is that the wolf deserves to be respected for their power. Right now, we are in a situation of human conflict and turmoil about the wolf. The wolves are out there in the hills very successfully being wolves. The risk to the permanent restoration of wolves in the northern Rockies is a human hazard, not a wolf hazard. And a couple of bad things have happened. Is that Wyoming's, whatever you say about Wyoming, reluctance to engage in an acceptable management program precipitated a fight that most people were not ready for. And people are in a situation now where those who support restoration of wolves and those who oppose it have become locked in a dramatic conflict, and unfortunately the lawsuit by a degree of magnitude has multiplied the number of enemies of wolves in the northern Rocky states. However you feel about wolves, the wolves have more human enemies after Judge Malloy's ruling than they had before. So what are we going to do about that? We need time. A major source of this conflict in the human support system for wolves is that change is happening faster than people can adapt to it. And we need to slow this thing down so that people can adapt, because your point is well taken, Mark. You can't manage a predator species by the numbers. You have to manage a predator species in its relationship with its prey. And we haven't gotten there yet. The timing of this fight that we find ourselves in now catches wildlife management science at a point where it has not matured to be able to put the methods in the field to manage a relationship between predators and prey. We're still trying to manage one species at a time by the numbers, the way we have traditionally managed ungulates. So timing and compression of emotions and conflict create a situation right now where everybody's mad and everybody's likely to make bad decisions. So I'm hoping we can slow down, cool off, let the science catch up, and most of all, let the people catch up to a changing environment.
Richard, some final words from you.
Yeah, like Ron, I think about time on this issue quite a bit, and I worry more about the long-term forces than short-term forces. I worry more about we're going to be 10 years or 20 years from now than where we are next year in terms of wolf numbers. And so in terms of rewilding the West and bringing bison and wolves back, which is rewilding. The long-term forces are still in place. The depopulation, the drive toward a redesign of the way our economy, and our increased understanding of the science behind these issues. But I fault myself in not thinking of a couple of other long-term forces nearly enough. And neither of these is in the discussion tonight. I do want to bring those up. These are long-term forces. One is global warming. We never talk about that. That's the monster in the room. I've been writing about global warming for 20 years, and our ability to understand it and deal with it politically has declined over those 20 years. We are less capable than we were 20 years ago. So maybe 2 years ago when I wrote the last book about this, I didn't think nearly as much about it as I do now. Now it's a huge problem, simply because we have decided, not just as a nation, but as a global society, that we are going to do nothing about it. And that portends very badly for our future. The other issue that we almost never talk about, and this is a long-term trend as well, is that your democracy is gone. No longer exists. It's only nominally a democracy. For the last 30 years, we've become plutocracy, and rich people rule. They become wealthier and wealthier, and they're calling the shots. That has produced an increasingly vicious politics in our country to the point we no longer have a national dialogue. It's produced an ability by that plutocracy to take wedge issues and tear us apart. And that's what we're seeing in the elections right now. That's what we'll see increasingly over the next 2 years. And I'm going to make a prediction that the wolf issue is going to become a wedge issue in Montana. It's going to be ratcheted up by a lot of money from outside the country, special oil money from Texas. Look forward to that over the next 2 years.
I'll second both his motions.
Thank you so much for your remarks, and thank you all for being here. The panel was fantastic, and thank you all for being here. And I also want to thank Western Watersheds Project who helped put this event on this evening.